where we left yesterday. Okay. After production, what obviously is a policy to decide your pricing strategy. So there are different strategies which you can use to decide your pricing. So let's see some of them. Cost plus pricing. Whatever production cost you have incurred, like maybe you have incurred 100 rupees of cost to produce something. So obviously what you will do, you will consider your cost and you add some profit to it, and then you will select maybe you add a 20% margin. So 120 rupees your price. So based on your price cost, you decide a price. So this is cost plus pricing method. Second is a marginal cost pricing. See, marginal cost we always consider like as you increase your production, obviously your cost of production is going to reduce. Why? Because economy of scale. So economy of scale, what I mean by economy of scale, as you increase your production, you will have a more number of products to divide your fixed cost. Okay, suppose what I mean by economy of scale. Suppose you are producing 10 units, okay, and your fixed cost is also 10 rupees. So per product you are incurring 1 rupees of a cost. Okay, but suppose you are like fixed cost is going to any more fixed. So suppose there is a 10 rupees fixed cost, but now you are producing 20 goods, 20 items. So now per piece your fixed cost will be only 50%. So as you increase your production, your fixed cost will be getting divided between more number of products. So that is how you will reduce your production cost. If I have to tell you like utility of economy of scale, marginal cost pricing, you can see China. Why we are not able to compete with China, or why world is not able to compete with China? Because they are specialized in some activities which does not allow any other company to enter, because they are the biggest producer, they are the biggest exporter. So that leads to increasing economy of scales. They will be able to produce goods at much cheaper rate, okay, which nobody can. That's why they are having monopoly at certain things. Like if I have to tell you example, button town. There is something called button town in China. That means world's 90% of the buttons are made in that particular village. Okay, since they have achieved that level of production or that quantity of production, they have achieved economy of scale. Since the next button, which they are going to produce, maybe will cost a very minute cost compared to other country tries to produce it. Suppose USA is trying to give order for buttons. So obviously they have already have technology, machines, equipments, and they are already producing a huge cost. So whichever next button they will produce, that will not cost them much. But India, where we don't have a technology, machines, equipment, maybe we have to buy that and then we can go for production. So obviously our marginal cost of production will be very high. The next unit which we will produce, which will be very high, whereas the next unit which China will produce, the cost will be very low. So based on your marginal cost of pricing, you decide your prices. Many a time you see that in electronic items, initially when they launch, the prices are normally very high. Why the prices are very high? Because initially they incur a lot of cost or lot of investment in terms of buying equipments, initial technology awareness, labor awareness, skill development. But once they have achieved their break-even point, or they have achieved that technology, or they have skilled labor, or they have already bought AI equipment, and they have no reached to break-even point. But now what they are doing, they are just trying to make some or other some money from the same equipments. Like they are not concerned about recovering their cost, because they have already recovered their cost. So as time moves, as technology moves, as they covered a lot of money which they have invested initially in equipments, labor, skilling and labor, they have already recovered that. So what they will do after some time, they will sell the price at much cheaper rate. Why? Because they have already recovered their cost. So whatever they are like producing now or selling now, this is share profit. Okay. So marginal cost of production, what is the cost you incur to produce next item? If your next item you are producing at lower cost, obviously you will sell at lower cost. If your next product produced at a higher cost, obviously you will produce higher price. Okay. Maybe consider that there can be a reverse situation. Suppose that raw material is very costly now. Okay, from tomorrow prices are going to up for raw material, for electricity, for equipment, for transportation, taxes, whatever be the case. Okay, since tomorrow prices are going to increase. Obviously, whatever you will produce tomorrow for the next unit, which will be cost more than what we have provided you yesterday. So, sir, कल से prices बढ़ने वाले हैं, so better you buy today. Okay. So this is marginal cost. Of marginal means what is the cost for a next option. Okay. Target return on investment pricing. Okay. Everyone has some target, like business organization. Suppose they are into enter into a brownfield or greenfield. Okay. Greenfield in the sense where there is no competition, where there is no competition called a greenfield, where you can charge anything which you want. So similarly, take an example of vaccines. Okay, nobody knows what's the cost of vaccine. Nobody knows what raw material it requires. Okay, but they give this much expenditure we have incurred to to do research on this particular vaccine. So obviously we want to cover that investment with this many units. Okay, maybe if, like if you have incurred 100 rupees of cost to produce particular thing, so we want to recover that 100 rupees and we are going to sell 100 units. So obviously what we'll do, we will sell each vaccine at 1 rupees. Okay, but suppose like we have incurred 1000 rupees and there are only 100 vaccines. So what we'll do, we will try to make 10 rupees profit from every vaccine. So there is targeted return on investment. You have already decided this much of return I was expecting from my investment, 10%, 15%, and based on that pricing, based on that return on investment calculation, you decide your price. So here intention is to recover whatever we have invested in a particular period or with a particular quantity. So based on that, you decide your price. And this is possible only and only when you have a lesser competition. Because if you are going to enter into already competition, a competitive market, you cannot decide a price. You are not a decision maker for a price. Like you can decide a lower price, but you cannot go for higher price. You don't have choice to go for higher price. So there is something called price skipping and price penetration. Price skimming is where you enter into a market where there is no competition. Price skimming is somewhere where you enter, there is no competition. You are the first initiator or you are the first mover. So obviously you have all the authority or all the possibility that you will charge higher prices. Okay, because people are not aware about the cost. They don't have any other option but to buy your product. So in that case, you can charge anything which you want. And this is normally happen with a research work. Okay. Since initial research costs a lot, and that gives a motivation for other people to go for research. Since they are making a profit, it will motivate others that they should also research on something and they should also come with some innovation so that they can make a higher profits. Okay, so initially when there is a greenfield, when there is no competition, normally people go for price skimming, whereas there is a next technique that is price penetration. Price penetration is what, when you are entering into a category where you have already huge competition. Like Geo is entering into telecom. Already BSNL, Airtel, Idea, MTNL, they were already competing on the prices. Okay, on most of the time, the only criteria to select particular plan, to select particular service was a pricing strategy. So when Geo entered into a market, what he has done, like he has given free of cost SIM cards, like he has given 2 GB or 1 GB data free of cost every day. So that initially led to increase in lot of customers who are opting for Geo. Normally people don't switch to other service, but here people have switched, they have changed their numbers, but still they are opted for a Geo. Why? Because there was a price penetration strategy, which is played by or which is opted by the Geo. So initially Geo entered into market with the strategy of price penetration. Okay, if I have to give an example of price skimming, then you can take the example of Novartis, which came with methylcobalamin. Okay, so methylcobalamin is injection which regenerates your nerves. Okay, so this can be used in most of the diseases, like heart diseases. It can be given to blood pressure patient, okay, or post operation. There are many things when you use methylcobalamin. So initially they came with methylcobalamin. So they used to charge a per tablet around 53 rupees. Okay, but ultimately when they like their patent is over, other brands have entered. Maybe like there is a brand called Mankind, there is a company called Mankind. They launch the same product, methylcobalamin, at 3 rupees or 4 rupees. So how can somebody can sell that same good at a 53 rupees? Another company can launch 3 to 4 rupees. So again, this is a pricing strategy. Experience curve pricing, like you have seen, you have analyzed the past data to understand at what price there is like required demand. Okay, suppose you have seen like in a Diwali, normally the prices of gold goes up. So obviously you will what you will do, you will decide price based on your experiences. Okay, or you see like in a summer holiday, or you can see in a rainy season. Normally people don't go for buying gold. So what you will do, you will reduce your prices. Though the gold price always depend on demand and supply. But just for the sake of example, based on different experience curves which you have seen in the past, you decide your price. Demand based price, obviously. Like I remember one case, like we went to Shirdi, and in Shirdi normally you will not see a menu card, or even if you see menu card, they don't mention prices there. Why? Because their prices differs based on time and season. Okay, that's why they don't mention prices there. You have to ask them what is like in normal hotels. I'm not talking about very premium hotels. In normal hotels, they don't mention about prices. You have to ask them how much this cost. So they will tell you the cost based on demand. Like evening time, they have a different pricing. Morning time, they have a different pricing. On Thursday, they have a different pricing. On normal days, like except weekday, on weekdays, except Thursday, they have a different pricing. So this is based on demand. Like whatever the demand, you will decide your pricing based on that. Or in many cases, many times, like, in a customized work, what you do, you just ask for a work and then you decide your pricing based on how much demand you have, how much customers are in a waiting. If you don't have a customer, maybe you will do the same work at a much lower cost, which you have uh, not even given in the past experience. But there is a lower demand, so you will go for that price. So there is a demand-based pricing. Then psychological pricing. We have, I think we have discussed in some of our lectures, behavioral economics. I think yesterday only we have discussed. So behavioral economics is about 99 rupees, 999 rupees. So this is what? This is again writing like just 99 rupees. So this just what that just adding, what that double nine is adding, below 100 rupees, below 1000 rupees. Just okay. See, price is just like may not be it's just, but just since they have mentioned just, you also start feeling adjust. Okay, you will also start feeling that it's very cheaper compared to other products. You are not aware about the pricing of other products, but it's psychological game. Okay, through psychological strategy they decide a price. Okay, like other example, there is a discount rate and there is a trade discount and cash discount. Okay, so what people do, people normally go to QPDS scheme, quantity purchase demand scheme. So what they do, if you buy 5 goods, you will get a 5%. If you buy 10%, you will get 12%. If you get like they continuously increase as you increase your production or you as you increase your orders. So this is psychological pricing. Maybe if you calculate like everything, whatever you're buying, maybe at the same rate or maybe having the same impact, but still this is psychological pricing based on demand of the customer or based on the psychology of customer. You decide your price. Competition oriented pricing, obviously we have seen price penetration or price skimming. If you have more competition, obviously you will enter with a lesser pricing. But if you don't have any competition, obviously you enter with higher pricing. We have seen that price skimming and price penetration. Okay. Price and output determination under various forms of market. See, we have just discussed the forms of market and the pricing strategy. Similarly, these strategies, like whatever strategies we have studied here, you have to pick one of the strategy and based on your like price and output determination, various forms of market, you have to decide your price. So which are the forms of market? There are four forms of market: monopolistic competition, oligopoly competition, monopoly competition, and perfect competition. So let's start from perfect competition. Perfect competition is a market where you have n number of suppliers. So there is a huge number of suppliers. There are a lot of people who are providing that same product, identical product. So what happens in this particular situation in this market? The moment you reduce the price a little bit, okay, most of the customer move to that product. Okay, since they are identical, there is no difference. Only difference or only thing which can matter there is a pricing strategy. Okay, in most of the cases. So by making a small change either in a price or in a quantity or in a service, you will attract a lot of customers. So this is what we call the perfect competition, where you have a lot of suppliers, where you have a huge demand for the product, but at the same time there are small changes can lead to a large difference. Okay, this is called perfect competition. Then there is a monopolistic competition. In monopolistic competition, there are so many buyers, but they are not identical. They are identical as well as they have some differences. Okay, what do you mean by identical as well as differences? Say there is a fixed exposable income that every month that person is having. Okay, so there are two choices. Either he can buy clothes from that disposable income, or he can go to restaurant. So there are two choices. They are not directly competition, but since economy or the earning is fixed, obviously they both are into competition. If person will go for a restaurant, he will not buy clothes, or if he goes to garment store, he will not go to restaurant. So there is a monopolistic competition, that means they are identical as well as differentiated, and there is a competition between intersectoral things. Uh, then monopoly is complete monopoly. Complete monopoly means there is only one position. Steel, railway. There are like not steel but railway. In railway, even today, government is having a monopoly. There is no other person, there is no other entity who can start a railway line. So obviously, though government has a different approach towards railway, they consider it as a social service. But still, this is an example of monopoly where only one person handles the entire market. Okay. So why this Amazon, Flipkart, Jio are providing their services at such a lower price? The only reason is to achieve the status of monopoly. Once they see, if you are in the perfect competition, maybe you will not be able to grab a huge market, because everybody has their own share, and by making a small changes, you can make a large difference. So you will not able to compete, or you will not make a huge profit from perfect competition, because you cannot increase the price, or you cannot monopolize your market. So nobody want to enter into perfect competition, but everybody wants to achieve a status of monopoly. So that's why what they are doing, they are first finishing the small retailers. And once they finish the small retailers or small players like Geo, Idea is already merged. Most of the telecom companies are already closed. So there are only two, three players. BSR, anyhow, whether you want to count it into telecom industry or not, that is up to you. But as far as I know, there are only two major competitors, that is Airtel and Jio. Okay. So almost they are on the verge of achieving monopoly. Okay. Now whatever they charge, you have to pay that. Okay, because you don't have any other option. All competition is already finished. So ultimately, what Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal want to achieve, they are to achieve a monopoly state, where people will dependent on online market. They have to go for an online market. So obviously, the moment you get habitual to buy from online, and you don't have any other option, the nearby stores are already closed, then they will charge whatever they want. This is again a Karl Marx theory. Okay. The last one is oligopoly. Oligopoly, there is a few, it's like unlike monopoly, there are few suppliers. So there is a competition, but there is not a perfect competition. There is not a huge competition. So there are only few suppliers, and you enter to that market, and there is fair game, like you are getting your own share. Okay, this is oligopoly. So we have discussed the different markets. In four different markets, you have a different pricing strategy. Maybe in a monopoly, you can charge whatever you want. In a perfect competition, you have to go for a competitive price. Okay, in monopolistic market, again you have to provide into a competitive market, and you have to attract your customer by different ways. Oligopoly, you can have a fair prices, because there is still there are not much suppliers. So different pricing strategies, different based on your costing, you have to decide your pricing on this particular markets. Okay. This is one example, a diagrammatical example of how you decide or determine your price under perfect competition. Perfect competition, again, there are many suppliers. Okay, there are many suppliers for the same identical product. So obviously, what you do, there is price on y-axis and output on x-axis. Suppose you have x like q quantity, and there is a p price, and exactly where they are meeting at e point. So that will be your price. Okay, this is how you decide the perfect price based on what quantity you have and what price you will be able to sell all the quantities. That will be your price. whatever you have produced, you want to sell everything, and you are sure that everything I will be able to share everything at this particular price. So you decide that price as a particular price. This is called profit competition, because ultimately in profit competition there are many players. There are many players, so you have to play with cautious. So what you do, you want to sell all your product at lowest possible price. Okay, so that you will able to sell all your products irrespective of the competition. And that point, that is E, will be your pricing strategy. Okay, this this uh, this is where we are done with our unit 3. Now we are touching towards unit 4. Okay, the first question that before we start unit 4, most of the times whenever we discuss economy of our own family, economic condition of our own family, what we do, we normally measure our income. What is our monthly income and how much of them we are spending, how much of our income we are saving. So why we have to measure about our income, why we have to measure about our savings, why we have to measure about our expenses, because these are the important concepts, okay, which decides your economic status. Okay, these are the things which decides your economic comfort. If you have amdani attani and kharcha rupaya, then obviously you will not be able to survive for a long time. Okay, initially maybe you will take a loan, maybe you will take a loan from multiple sources, but ultimately you have to repay them. Since you have only 1 rupees income, since you have 50 paisa income and 1 rupee as an expenditure, definitely you are never going to have any saving, and you will never be able to repay the loans which you have taken. In fact, every time you have to look for a loan. Okay, so what are the ways you can overcome this situation? Obviously, either you have to reduce your expenditure from 1 rupees to 50 paisa, or you have to increase your income from 50 paisa to 1 rupees, or you have to simultaneously work on the both the things, like increase your income by 75 paisa or reduce your expenditure by 75%. Okay. So again, the basic principle which I have discussed, how to increase efficiency. So okay, if we apply that three principles which we have discussed about input output ratio, how to manage that input, obviously you will be able to manage your situation. So obviously it's like a nation is also like a home. There are somebody who is the head of the family. Similarly, there is somebody who is the head of the nation, like prime minister, finance minister. They are in charge of managing national finance or country's finance. So what they do, to understand how much they are earning, to understand how much they are spending, and how much they're supposed to spend. It's not that only reducing this, your expenditure will serve purpose. Basically, obviously, whatever is the basic expenses, you have to incur that, or you have to spend money on that. Okay, you cannot replace your daily needs. You have to buy your food, you have to buy milk, you have to buy whatever that is mandatory for a family. Okay, but obviously, you can save money on certain things which are not immediately needed. Okay, so this is why we have to measure a national income. Okay, here we are going to see the same thing. Various ways of measuring your national income. Various ways how can you measure your expenditure, what are the methods of expenditure, how you ensure a balance sheet or a balancing your figure, like whatever is your income and whatever is your expenditure. Okay. Why we make a budget? Why we make a budget at the start of the year? And what is the utility of that budget? That everything comes under this chapter, and we are going to see like which are the ways we are making income, like sectors of economy, agriculture, industry, service sector. Which are the what is the linkage between them? Why we are trying to shift from agriculture to secondary tertiary? So some of the questions and their answers we will find in this fourth unit. Okay. So first of all, national income. We have discussed what is national income, whatever money or whatever that country is making in a year, that is called national income. Okay, so that is we can calculate from various ways. So there are various concepts of national income. These are the explained below one by one. So first we'll see what is GDP. Okay, this is actually the third point, but we are discussing first because once you understand GDP, it is easy to understand that one. Okay, so what is GDP, gross domestic product? So whatever production a country is having, whatever production country is having, that comes into domestic product. So that this is something where we consider a boundary. Okay. Irrespective of who is producing, maybe somebody is coming from the USA or somebody is coming from UK, but they are doing their business in India. So that production will also be counted in GDP, gross domestic product. The total value of all final goods and services accruing to an economy in one accounting year will come under the heading of GDP. Okay. Whatever we are producing, the final value of the goods, market value, that will become under GDP, that is gross domestic product. Irrespective of its Indian or foreign national, whoever is producing, that everything comes under the national, everything comes under GDP. If this production is happening in a boundary of India or in a boundary of that particular nation. Okay. So there is a formula to calculate GDP. GDP C plus GI plus G export minus input. Okay, or net export. Okay. C is consumption expenditure of households. Okay, whatever expenditure consumers, household people are making, that will come in GDP. GI, gross investment by firms, whatever investment in private firms has made, government expenditure, and ultimately net input. Okay, X minus M, value of export minus value of input. So finally, what you get? Net export. So net export plus government expenditure plus private firms investment plus household expenditure. If you calculate that, ultimately you will come to know what we have produced. Like, see, why this formula? Understand this formula rather than mugging up this formula. So whatever you are producing, somebody will consume that. Okay, whatever you are producing, somebody will consume that. But ultimately you have also incurred some cost to produce that. So whatever cost you have incurred to produce that, plus how much you have consumed, that ultimately give you how much you have produced. Okay, consumption expenditure from household. So whatever amount household are spending, that means they are ultimately consuming whatever goods we have produced. Okay. Second is gross investment firms. So this is the investment, like whatever consumers are consuming, everything is not income. You have also invested something in that. So obviously investment. Second, who will consume whatever we have produced? Government will consume, because government is having huge industries. They are public sector enterprises. They are spending, or they are consuming goods for public sector, for social services, and finally how much we have exported. Okay, minus export, like maybe some goods we have imported as a raw material, and ultimately we have sent something. So whatever we have made a surplus from import export, that will also come into this category. And we will come to know what is the position, or what is the GDP, or what is actually produced in our country. So this is what gross domestic product. The formula is C plus GI plus G plus net export. Okay. Similarly, we have GNP, gross national product. Okay. Gross national product is again a similar concept, but here we will consider income that is created by Indians. Okay, we don't consider any MNC or any foreign MNC which have produced in India. So we will not consider that production into GNP, gross national product. So in gross national product, we will consider only that production which done by Indians irrespective of boundary. Maybe Tata or maybe Ambani go to US or UK and they will make some production there. They will make some profit from there. Obviously, that profit of that thing will also count into GNP. Like India is receiving highest remittance in the world. Okay, so obviously that remittance will come into gross national product. So difference between GDP and GNP is GDP is by where. Okay, if it is produced in India or it is produced in a country boundary, obviously we will count into GDP. So what about GNP? GNP is who? WHO who has produced it? If Indians have produced it, obviously we will take into consideration national product, irrespective of boundary. Okay, so GDP is about where, GNP is about who. Okay, I know this is little confusing, but if you revise from the notes, or if you revise from internet or wherever you have the sources books, you revise it. Obviously, you will get it, because basic idea we have discussed. GDP is about where in an Indian boundary we are producing in a boundary. Obviously, that will get counted to GDP production. If it is by Indians, then we will get reduced into GN, counted to GN. So the question is, which will be more, GDP or GN? Okay, that depends on country to country. If their local people are very active and they are making more of the income compared to what they are giving outside, then obviously GN will be more. But if foreign companies are there, like in an era of value, global value chain, in a globalization, maybe like it is very difficult to differentiate between GDP and GN, because if even your people are going outside and our outside people are coming to India or to your nation, so obviously maybe that two can be same, or maybe one of them can be more or less. So there is no thumb rule, or there is no a common situation. Net national product or national income. So complete national income, whatever government is getting from taxes, from production, from whatever sort of subsidies, public sector enterprises, from whatever source government is making income, that is national income. National income and factor cost. Factor cost we have discussed. Factors of production. So factor is nothing but factor is raw material. Okay, raw material cost. Whatever cost you have incurred to buy that raw material, like somebody has a garment store, or somebody is having say ice cream store. So whenever they will eat any ice cream, they will not calculate that I have eaten, I have consumed a 20 rupees ice cream pack. Like if the MRP is 20 rupees, what they will do? They will think like I have consumed maybe 7 rupees or 8 rupees of ice cream. Why? Because this is what they have spent as a factor cost, or as a input. So obviously they will consume, or they will calculate their expenditure based on factor cost. But if somebody is outsider and he goes to he eats ice cream, what they will do? They will consider that today I spent 20 rupees. But somebody who's owning a ice cream shop, they will say today I spent a 7 rupees or 8 rupees based on the cost of the price. So whenever you measure a national income at a factor cost, this is called national income at a factor cost. There is another way, that is national income at market price. Which one will be more? National income at a factor cost or national income at market price? Obviously market price, because there is a value addition. You are also making some profit from that. Okay. Personal income, obviously individual income, per capita income will come into a personal income. What the business entities or the individual people have made into that particular year, that will also indicates the national income. If you calculate, see how we actually come to national income. Whatever their people or their government is earning, ultimately that will be the national income. Okay. So people are making a money, then obviously they will pay taxes. They will pay taxes. Government will spend on infrastructure. Infrastructure is better, then obviously people income will also increase. If people income will increase, they will pay more taxes. Then government will be able to provide more infrastructure. So this is how we can understand the growth of nation based on personal income. We always struggle to achieve a high per capita income. Like though India's GDP is fifth largest GDP, 2.7 trillion GDP, but still in India we have a lot of people who are poor, and ultimately our personal income or per capita income is less than $2,000, whereas China is more than $9,000. Okay, though we have started together, okay, there are many nations which are much behind than India in comparison with the GDP growth, or in absolute GDP, but still they are much better than us in terms of personal income. Okay, India is nowhere I think nowhere in the top 50 or top 60 countries in terms of per capita. There are multiple reasons. One reason which immediately comes to our mind is obviously population. Okay, disposable personal income. What is disposable income? Disposable income is whatever money you left after paying your taxes. That is disposable income. See, after you have paid your taxes, whatever money you have, obviously you can spend wherever you want. Okay, but initially when you receive money, you don't have that freedom. You have to pay taxes. Okay, you have to pay taxes. That's why after paying taxes, whatever amount is left, that amount is called disposable personal. Okay, you can spend that money wherever you want. Whether you want to go for a restaurant, you want to go for a garment, or you want to go for a tourism, wherever you want to go, you are free to spend that money. That is what is called disposable. This is at your own disposable. You have to decide where you want to spend that particular amount. So these are the six ways we have tried to understand, or we try to sum up in a shortest possible time period. I'm sure this is not that easy. Obviously, at least first 2 3 times you will face some difficulty and you will get MCQs. So better before you get any issue, before this problem goes beyond control, I will suggest read these terms from some of the standard sources. We have discussed the slides. Something more about GDP. GDP includes the value of all expenditure within the economy, regardless of who earns it. Okay, ultimately we have seen GDP includes all kinds of expenditure, like private investment, public investment, government expenditure. Everything comes under GDP. GDP includes the value of final goods, not intermediate goods. So what we are measuring in a GDP, that is ultimately final goods. We are not measuring the raw material or working progress. We are measuring only the final output. Final goods, that is cars, not steel to produce the cars, not unfinished goods, including intermediate goods leads to double counting. If you count intermediate goods as well as if you are counting final goods, obviously that will lead to double counting. Ultimately, what you will see that our GDP is going very fast. But again, the main reason of this growth, this sudden growth will be a double counting. That is a false counting. So ultimately, what you have to do, either you have to measure raw material or you have to measure final good. But it is very difficult to measure final good. But because finish working progress goods, because that ultimately passes through various stages. So which one you will count and how do you remember that we have already counted? So better than this, what we do, we actually measure the final goods, which is ready for consumption. Okay. Net national product at the market price. We have seen net national product at a factor price. So now the prices at NP equal to GNP minus depreciation. So depreciation is something like over the period of time, your equipments, your infrastructure gets depreciated. That means the value or the price, or the quality of that particular product will decrease. So since the prices of that particular product or the infrastructure reduces, you have to also minus that from your assets. Okay, like today you have bought the car. You can say like I have a 5 lakh rupees of car. If tomorrow I face any issue, I can sell this car for 5 lakh rupees and I can come out of the problem. After 2 years, maybe you will not be able to say the same sentence. Maybe what you will be sentence like I have a car. If I have any problem after 2 lakh 50,000, I can sell this car and I can still come out of the problem. Maybe after 5 6 years, you may say that I have 1 lakh rupees car. Even if there is any problem, I can sell this car at a 1 lakh rupees car. I can come out. So every year or after every gap, the price of particular car or assets depreciates. So by adjusting the depreciation, what we get is net national product, net income or net national product when you adjust depreciation. Because if you are calculating your assets value at the same price, then maybe you will ultimately come to a false realization. So for you to calculate net national product, you have to minus depreciation. So I hope depreciation you have understood. Depreciation is nothing but decrease in prices over a period of time. Maybe infrastructure price of equipment, okay, whatever you have. Depreciation value of capital, building and other assets. Also called NNP, net national product at market prices. Since the value of all the goods and services is taken at a market price. Okay, that can be a market price and there can be a factor price. So you have to see or you have to read the full sentences to get this question. Net national income or net national product at market price or factor price. Okay. Let's see some of the trends in national income, growth of national income in India. We have seen this chart shows or this graph shows net national income of India from 2003 to 2009. Okay, so we can see there is a lot of ups and downs, and there is decoupling of economy. I hope you write this running notes because we use lots of keywords. This will be useful to understand economics. So what we mean by decoupling of economics? Decoupling of economics means when world is degrowing, India is actually growing. And when world is growing, India is actually growing. So why India has comparatively lesser effect of a world economy? Okay, when the entire world was going through a depression, depression, in a downward trend during 2008-9. India was actually growing with the highest growth. 2007 you can see 9.2%. In 2008 you can see 9%, and there are many people who are saying that very soon we will touch a double digit, which was one of the highest growth. So why India? Like the question comes, why India is able to sustain the higher economic growth even after the world was degrowing? Because of our fundamentals, our market. Okay, we have a huge consumption-based economy. Whatever you produce, there is a huge number of customers to to consume that goods. Okay, whereas most of the other developed nations they are dependent on export. So whatever they produce, they need some market to export that product. Okay. Like maybe if you go to 1950s or maybe before that, why British are entered into India? Okay, 17th. Okay. Why they entered into India? Obviously, you have a bigger market. Colonialism was all revolving around the marketplace. Everybody required, everybody wanted to sell their products, whatever they were producing. Like there were equipment, there was machines, there was electronic machines. So now the production has increased, and they were looking for a new market to sell their product. But India was in a condition even now and then, both the situation. India has already huge population or huge consumption-based economy. So whatever we produce, we can consume in our own country. That's why India's fundamentals are very strong. India's per capita income was may not be very high, but it is stagnant, or it is in most of the cases it is equally divided. You can say equally divided. This is what fundamental economics is like. Most of the people having a better income. That's why India is able to sustain its high economic growth. When world, like if I tell you recent trend 2021, where world is growing at average 3.5% of economic growth, India is actually growing at a 4.5 to 5% of economic growth. Only India. Why? Because of strong fundamentals. Okay, so this is a trend about economic growth in a different year. You can see like there are obviously maybe ups and downs, but the lowest growth was a 4.3%. This is again a distant trend for many countries to achieve even a 4.3% of economic growth. Okay, this is achievement of India. Like Made in India got a bank, and Indian economy is growing with a double digit. Like there's a possibility that very soon we will achieve double digit. This year, our Prime Minister said that from 2.7 trillion economy, we are planning for 5 trillion economy. Okay, which is almost double within a 3 to 4 years. Okay, to reach to 2.7 trillion economy, it took us around 70 years. But from 2.7 $2.7 trillion to 5%, $5 trillion, we are planning to achieve in next 4 to 5 years. Maybe this pandemic or this situation will slow down our economic growth. But if we work similarly, or if we work on the same time, that day is not far when we touch 5 trillion. Okay. Trends in national income and per capita income. National income and per capita income. If you look at like, there are three columns. First is plan. Second is national income percentage. Third is per capita income. So I will suggest look at per capita income first time. Like there is a first plan, second year plan, third year plan. So these are the 5 year plans. Okay, 1950 to 55, 55 to 60, then 60 to 65, 65 to 70. So these are the 5 year plans. So why we have to understand the trends in national income per capita income? Because the political situation was different in all this, in most of the financial plans, the 5 year plans. Okay, so initially you can see there was a 1.8, then it's slowly growing. Okay, going, and it has reached to 4.9, 3.7, 6.6, 6.7.1. So we are continuously growing at per capita income. Even our national income is growing continuously. So initially there was like, what was the reason that initially our national income or per capita income was low? The reason is initially from 1950 to 1990, 1950 to 1990, if you see, we have observed we have observed socialistic policy. Socialistic policy in the sense government was having a monopoly over most of the sectors, and the intention of government was if private player comes into this industry, maybe that will lead to inequality or that will lead to capitalism which US has. Whereas India was more in a favor of Russia or China, where we were interested in applying a socialistic policy, Gandhian socialism. Okay, but but unfortunately, that socialistic policies were not took off the way our prime minister or the ministers of that time thought. Okay, so initially there was a huge corruption because officers had all the powers. There was no cross-checking method. There was no transparency, no technology, and people were dependent on officials, okay, or politicians. So initially, if you see, India was not able to achieve any kind of growth in terms of national income as well as in per capita. To some extent, to large extent, we are in a stagnant growth. Okay, but the moment we have accepted 1991 LPG program, you can see like after 6 years, 6 months, you can see our growth has multiplied. Okay, we have grown very fast. Okay, this is a miracle which happened after LPG production. LPG, I hope you understand liberalization, privatization, globalization. Liberalization is government has reduced the licensing rights. Now people can start their business, they can move to different states. Privatization, private players were allowed to enter into many sectors where only government had a monopoly. Now that leads to increasing competition may lead to increasing quality. Since quality has improved, people are opting for those services which are provided by government and private players because there was improvement in quality. They were ready to pay more money. That attracted foreign direct investment, foreign indirect investment, and that is how India took off its growth. Okay, so just for the information of there is a point in our syllabus that what are the trends in national economy and per capita income. So we can see India's per capita income, India's national income has increased from 1991 onwards. Okay, even if you look at in terms of poverty, in 1950, almost 75 to 80% of people were in the category of India, that is below poverty line. 1990, there were around 50% of people who were still below poverty line. But if you look at after LPG, we have the faster our growth. We have enlarged or we have diversified our efforts towards bringing people from below poverty line to above poverty line. India has achieved after LPG since GDP has increased. And why we have to worry about the GDP? Why we related about the GDP? We never we never realize the importance of GDP in our own life. Forget about nation's income. What is the importance of GDP in our life? Why we have to see why GDP is growing at 2%, 4%? And they many a time people say that it doesn't matter what GDP is doing. What matters is whether a particular party is taking care of ourselves or not. A particular party is looking for our subsidy or loan revenue or whatever that is individual reasons. So they are not concerned about GDP, but they are more concerned about a populist policy. Populist policy means लोग लुभावन वाले ये कर देंगे वो कर देंगे ऐसा कर देंगे वैसा कर देंगे. So people are more interested in the facts. This is what we call post-truth era, where people or the consensus of people arrived because of emotions, okay, rather than fact. Okay, and obviously that is not a healthy situation. So even here, people are not looking for economy or economic indicators, but where they are looking at populist policies, or populist words, okay, or the media which deciding which segment to focus on. Like there is a protest in Delhi, outskirts of Delhi, but none of the media are going there and they are showing what is happening on the borders of Delhi, where they are completely focused on something else because they want to divert attention of people from farmers protest. Okay, that is our politics. But where we are interested to see what was economic growth structure from 1950 to 1990 and 1990 onwards, before and after LPG. So these are some of the plans which we can see, which laid made to towards a growth story after we cleared or after we have decided to go for LPG. Okay, globalization, privatization, and digitalization. Globalization again, like becoming a global village, entire world is becoming a one village. So that is globalization. Anybody can sell anything to any country. Anybody can buy anything from other country. Okay, this is what we call globalization. Okay, so there are three methods of measuring GDP. Obviously, like we have discussed how to measure national income, there are various ways. Among this, maybe most of the countries have chosen GDP, but again, there are various methods. There are three methods to calculate GDP. How we calculate GDP? There is one expenditure method, there is income method, and there is production. Okay. So before we move to GDP and income based or expenditure based, we will see what is gross value added. Okay. GVA, this is something very core and very important for MBA students because GVA is something which is very core for core concept to understand most of the concepts which are related with MBA or management stories. So gross value added system is like at every stage you add some value to them. This is also gross value added system of the GVA system. So every stage you add value into it. Okay. Like you are a farmer. Okay, you go to market, you buy some fertilizer seeds. So what that fertilizer and seed companies doing? They are adding some value year on year in their fertilizer, in their pesticides, in their seeds, so that there will be a better production. Okay, so they have done their job. So when farmer buys these goods, obviously he will also add value to it, having a better quality, giving a better water, saving water, so that there will be lesser cost. Okay, saving environment, using going for organic farming. Okay, and ultimately that's selling it to a food processing industry. And when food processing industry buys that product, obviously rather than exporting it or directly selling it to consumer, what they are doing, they are making, they are processing that food so that it can be preserved for a long time. Or maybe they are converting that product into higher value product. Like rather than selling tomato, they are converting that tomato into tomato ketchup, which can be export, which can be useful to sustain or to increase its shelf life. And obviously, farmer, country, everyone, it's a win-win situation. Everyone gets a benefit out of that gross value added process. Okay, so GVA is at every stage. At every stage, you add some value to product so that the value or the price of the product will increase. So at every stage, you are adding some value to product. So ultimately, whatever final price you get, it will be more than what you get from raw material. Okay. So why there is A.G. Frank, A.G. Frank thinker, who has said why developing nations or the underdeveloped nations are there, and why developed nations are now have achieved this goal. So A.G. Frank is saying intentionally developed nations ensure that there should be deindustrialization of developing and underdeveloped nations so that since they don't have industry, since they don't have demand, what they do, they sell their raw material to developed nations. And once developed nation receives those raw material, they convert that raw material into a finished good, and they add gross value to that product, and ultimately they return. They are selling to the same country, sold them a raw material, at a higher price, and they have no other choice to but buy from those countries because they don't have technology, they don't have enough equipment, they don't have competitive advantage. So that's why they have to sell it to the developed nations, and developed nation again sell the same goods to underdeveloped nations. So again, they have to pay huge money than what they have received when they were selling raw material. So this is how they are sustaining. This is how developed nations are able to sustain their dominance or their status as a developed nation. So this is what we understand by gross value added. Okay, production method is some of the gross value added. Next, we are going to discuss expenditure method. We have already discussed about expenditure method. Whatever money you spend in the market, that all expenditure will counted into a measuring GDP. If everybody has spent like personal income, you have spent personal, you have spent, government has spent some money. Private player have invested something. Okay, or whatever you spend, you calculate your complete expenditure. What you will ultimately get your income. Take example in a family. There are two ways. Either you can measure your income to understand what is your income, or there is a second way. You have to calculate. Like maybe you are not sure how much money you have made in this month. Maybe there are multiple sources from which you get money. So what you can do? Okay, ultimately what we have in hand, like what is the left with the hand? Maybe you have 1,000 rupees. So now you are calculating how much we spent on kirana, how much we spent on electricity, how much we spent on television recharge, how much we spent on mobile recharge, whatever expenditures you have. Okay. Did I bought anything new in a family? Like whatever you have expenditure, whatever the expenditure. If you calculate all your expenditure and what money you have to give, ultimately where you reach at your income. Okay. Sum of final expenditure. There is income method. Sum of income payments and cost incurred in production. So whatever income you have generated and whatever income you have generated as an individual or as a company, but all income will lead to company. If there are four members in a family, everybody has income of 100 rupees. So obviously, what is income of family? 200 rupees. So this is also a way. This is also a way to measure a GDP. First, calculate everybody's expenditure, or calculate everybody's income, or calculate what is a value addition at each stage. So final product. That will also help you to understand what is the. Now let's introduce you to sectors of economy. There are three sectors of economy: primary industry, manufacturing industry, and service industry. Okay. Primary industry is about raw material. So whatever raw material you create, that all comes under primary industry. Okay. This is you can also in a factor of production you can bifurcate primary into a land. So that is all natural resources which provide you raw material. That all comes under a primary industry. Example is fishing, farming, mining, agriculture products. Everything which used as a raw material in secondary industry calculated as or called as a primary sector. Predominantly agriculture. Fishing as a fish agriculture. Okay, farming is also farming. Mining is also part of agriculture because you get raw material from there. So agricultural activities or the natural resources from wherever you get a natural resources, everything called a primary industry. Okay. Then what primary industry and secondary industry has a relationship? Whatever raw material that primary industry has, they sell that raw material to manufacturing industry. Okay. Manufacturing industry example is car factory, bravery, your so you add value to whatever raw material you have received, whatever raw material you have received from primary industry, that is called manufacturing. Actual manufacturing of those products. By getting tomato, you convert into tomato sauce, and you then sell tomato sauce. So this is a manufacturing. You have converted raw material into a finished product. Okay. Service is for conducting your primary and secondary industry. You need some kind of services like banking service, retail shop, transportation, restaurants. So whatever services that you require to have a regular business or a simple life or ease of living, so these all services comes under the service category or third category or third sector of economy. So these are the three sectors of economy. In next lecture, we will see what are the three sectors of economy. Their interrelationship, employment, or like what is the structural change we require to change India's fate, and what is different between India's economic structure, and what is the difference between US economic structure. So there are certain things we will